Hi, welcome to Infusion Health, the podcast. And I'm comedian Cris Patrick, a.k.a. self-proclaimed power man. And I'm here with my co-host and significant other, Rach.
Hey, guys.
Now, today we got an interesting show. This is one of these shows that...
This is a fun show.
Yeah, it's very exciting to have her. She's a TikToker, and she's also an educator. She teaches history and politics in Toronto, Canada, and she's also a motorcyclist. So this is one of these shows that before we even started the podcast, we're like talking and all that. I'm like, I should be recording this. We're talking about two things I love: history and motorcycles. Is like, oh, So,
there we go.
So it's like, wait a minute, we're having like this conversation. It's like, wait, we should start the show.
So, all right, well, introduce her so she can talk.
And like I said, if you haven't seen her TikTok videos, you really got to see her TikTok videos.
Unlearn 16.
What's it again, Rach?
Well, bring her in. She can say it for herself.
Okay. You really got to check out some of her TikTok videos. She has a lot to say about a lot of different things, and very interesting. And it's exciting to have her on the show. Please welcome Joanna Johnson. Joanna, welcome to the show.
How you doing? Hey. Well, I like the class. I'm going to get that sound effect for my classroom. Damn. I can press that button, and that can happen when I walk in. I like it.
So you're calling from Toronto, Canada, and the show today is on human kindness. So what are some things you got to say about human kindness?
Oh wow, that's a big category. I think that's a broad. Well, first of all, I think Canadians invented it, so you told the right person, right? We say sorry about everything, so
yeah.
We have a lock on it. Okay, I think we have a lock on it. I think the key to it doesn't take a rocket scientist, I think, to understand the basis of it. And the basis of it is very, very simple, and it's been cliched to death, but it's do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And I don't mean to sound like Confucius there, but that's
no, I think that's in any religion.
Yeah, it is every religion. Absolutely. I teach a world religions class, and by the time we get to the end of all 12 religions, usually my kids look at me and go, look, that was kind of like the same thing 12 times. In substance, right? In their basic tenets, fine, the day of rest changes, what you wear, what you eat, maybe how you practice your rituals.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
But the basis of it all is very, very similar. And I think what gets in the way of a lot of human kindness is a lot of human fear. And unfortunately, fear tends to trump that because it makes us insecure and it makes us guarded. And as soon as we are those two things, we don't lead with our heart. So,
Well, it's interesting. You said you could teach different religions, and well, you work in a private school, right, in Canada?
I do. Yeah, the way it works in Canada, the different provinces come up with curriculum, so it's a little different than the state. So we follow very specific curriculum guidelines, and there's specific courses that you can teach. One of the courses is a grade 11 course called World Religions, and we go over sort of the 12 major world religions. Okay. Yeah. See, in America,
if you tried to teach that in public school, no way would that happen. And then you got...
Yeah, that's just silly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And well, see, America, in America, we have private school, and then you have, you got Lutheran school, you got Catholic school,
right.
And you have the different religions who have their own private schools. Now, what me and Rach practice a thing called New Thought religion, and it's kind of a religion that was started by Ernest Holmes, and what he was studying to be a priest, and what he found out is that a lot of this stuff has the same stuff. So if it's kind of combining all the religions, and we honor and we recognize our religion. Now, one of the things about being an educator is like some people, it's like, well, how come we can't have a prayer before school? Okay, well, when public schools were started in America, it was started because, and it was said, church and state. You're here to have an education. You're not here to talk religion or anything like that. So people, well, then how come the Somalians, how come they can pray? How come they can pray every day? Well, that's their culture. That's their religion. Well, how come we can't? Okay, well, then if you want, and I got nothing against people in public schools having a prayer group, but you can't advertise. You can't say, if you guys want to get together in the classroom and have a prayer group, fine, but you can't advertise, and you can't make it one way. You know what I mean? And that's the way schools were built. That's the way public schools were built.
For sure. I mean, not so long ago, I mean, Canada is the same thing. I mean, when I grew up in elementary school, so I remember saying the Lord's Prayer in the morning in public school.
Mhm.
That happened. I remember, in parts of my high school, it's maybe somewhere around in my high school years. So in the 90s, we stopped doing that. But I also remember in the 90s that stores were closed on Sundays.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You couldn't go to a store on Sunday, right? And all of these are vestiges of us being a Christian country. And
Yeah.
can I respect that religion? Sure. Can I see it as being a foundational component? Sure. But I also have to understand and hopefully push towards not being that, because we've always deemed ourselves to be a secular democracy. And if we're a secular democracy, we still have a bit of a ways to come.
Yeah.
You guys, we still have God in our national anthem. We still take off Christmas holiday. We still take off Easter, right? We call it something else to make it sound nice, but let's be honest, that's what we do.
Mhm.
You guys also have God on your money.
Yeah.
We still have these vestiges, right? And I mean, lots of people think that's history. That's not history. That was in the Cold War. You guys did that. Your government did that in a very particular time for a very particular political purpose, not even a religious one.
Mhm.
And I think all of these things, and I think people we tap into fear here real quick, because I think people get very, very uncomfortable when you start to change things that always were, and they feel attacked as a result, rather than seeing it for what it really is, which is just making more space for more people to have more ways of expressing themselves and feeling more comfortable in their own, in their own space and their own belief systems and all of that thing, so they can do that on their own, and we can come together and do what we do as a collective.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's the thing too, is that, I remember when I was in elementary school, up until 6th grade, we said the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
And we had to do that every day. I pledge. I could say it in my sleep. That's how many times I said it. But then
Listen, I almost say it.
But my thing is too, is that we've had people immigrate in from the country, and I got nothing against people immigrating in from the country, but it's like, well, we shouldn't have to say pledge.
We all started out as immigrants.
Yeah, we all started out as immigrants.
except for those 300,000 indigenous people, but besides them.
Yeah. Well,
whether you were dragged, whether you were dragged over here, or you lived over here in your wealth or whatever, the thing is that you guys came up and through generations of this thought. And for me, myself, I think that, in medical terms these days, they've said that the gut is a second brain. I think our heart needs to be connected to our brain, and our brain should be our second heart.
That's amazing. Yeah, for sure. I agree. You know what? I think it is. What's funny? I really think it is in a lot of ways, but what ends up happening is it's all based in fear. It's all based on what we don't know.
Exactly.
And as soon as we don't know something, which is why obviously education is a very big thing for me. As soon as we don't know something, we fear it.
Yeah.
And we want to limit it, and we want to curtail it, or we want to shape it and control it. I mean, what's going on in the United States right now is, it's a lot of fear. It's a lot of fear, right? And they're riling people up. A very small minority, in my opinion, are riling good people up. I really do think. I think there's way more good than bad in this world.
Yes.
And I think they're riling a lot of good people up, and they're figuring out trigger points to tap into fear, so that they can rile them up, so that they control, limit, and curtail, and maybe even go backwards to make people feel good again.
Mm-hmm.
I did this funny TikTok not too long ago, and some people got it and some people didn't. And I got, those gumballs you get out of the machine, you pay a quarter. I don't know, you might pay $2 nowadays. I don't know what you pay.
A quarter in there for the kids.
There you go. So you get that out, right? And you're so excited because it's the best thing you could possibly do at the grocery store. And you pop it in your mouth, and in about 37 seconds, 3 things happen. Number 1, you lose the taste. Number 2, it becomes like chewing cement.
Yeah.
And number 3, you're likely to get a cavity.
Mm-hmm.
But still to this day, I see those gums and I think of this lovely time in my youth, in my childlike years, where everything was lovely.
Yeah.
And it wasn't lovely. I was just young and stupid and naive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so this gum becomes a metaphor for that. And I popped it in my mouth the other day and I was thrilled to tooth. I said, see, that's what history is. It's a delusional nostalgia that makes us scared of the future and nostalgic for the past, but that past didn't really exist the way we remember it existing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love my childhood, don't get me wrong, but we've come a long way since 1975.
Yeah.
And I think not only that, but it's not the same as everybody's plate is different in the history.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's plate is so different. Like the rich white people had a massive plate,
100%.
massive banquets, and the poorer people, brown, black, they were starving.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely,
that was
you
the
have
same
all of
in
this
education. It was the same in politics. It's not just the food in front of you, but it's the whole life system that people have grown up with.
Absolutely. The laws were different. I don't know the laws in Canada, but the laws in the States pertaining to this, but I know that in Canada, it was legal for, I don't know if I'm allowed to say certain words on your podcast. I'm going to say it. Can you beat me out if it's not appropriate?
No, you're fine. And we always throw a disclaimer on. We let everybody say whatever they want.
There we go. It's not, look, I'm not going to swear or anything, but up until 1985 in Canada, if you were married, there was no such thing as marital rape. It was just saying the word rape. On TikTok, I get blocked for saying that sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
There was no such thing. You weren't allowed to beat your wife, but there was no such thing as, there was no clause, there was no legality that stipulated you could go to the police if your husband had committed sexual assault, because the inference there was you were property.
Yeah.
Because that was what you did in a marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that's not that long ago, right? But those kinds of laws aren't that old.
Yeah.
And we're still growing from that. And people talk about tradition, and I always say, listen, I love tradition if it serves us now.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then it has no more place. You can't just say, well, it's tradition and expect me to grant it privilege in my world. Does it serve a purpose now or doesn't it? And if it doesn't, it's time to get new tradition.
Well, if you look at like you said, marital rape, there's also too, just recently they just passed a bill saying that it's illegal to lynch people. They just
recently. Yeah. Can you imagine? Just
recently. Now my question is, I'm glad, don't get me wrong, I'm glad we have that bill now, but what took them so long to put a bill like that up?
Yeah. And why, not only what took them so long to put it up, but what the hell's going on right now that has spawned the necessity for that?
Yeah.
What has happened? And I'll tell you what's happened. It's fear, it's regression, it's all of those things that we've then gone back, and I'm looking around obviously with the Roe versus Wade stuff, and you're looking at the Don't Say Gay stuff, and you're looking at Texas and all of these different bills that, honest to God, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if somebody would have told me that Roe versus Wade would be overturned,
I know,
I would have laughed.
Mm-hmm.
I would have laughed because most people don't know this, but Roe versus Wade has been held up, I think, by 3 separate Republican-dominated Supreme Courts. We're not just talking about the Democrats here.
Mm-hmm.
It has been held up with Republicans sitting as a majority in that court.
Yeah.
Now, something else has happened here. This isn't about Republicans and Democrats. This is something else. And it's the something else that is truly terrifying at this moment.
Exactly. And you hit on the big picture, because when you look at Roe versus Wade, you got to look at okay, why are they overturning this? Why is this? But then all of a sudden it's like there's a bigger agenda going on. And like you said, I think one of your TikToks, we were listening to it on the way back home, and it was like there's something else going on to where they're going to take this. And I think you were talking about birth control, saying that then they're going to...
It'll happen.
Yeah, they're going to start taking away birth control. They're going to start taking away, you know, condoms and all that, where it's like, okay, are we going backwards? And
to further understand that, you guys need to go and watch that TikTok, because we can't give it justice. We're just trying to move the story forward for you guys.
Okay, but also too, when you look at this thing about Roe versus Wade coming out, here's the thing, and this is the thing. I don't know if anybody saw this, but all of a sudden, this how people found out about this was this information got leaked out, and next thing you know, you get people like Ted Cruz, Republican, I think from Texas, and some other Republicans going, "Well, who leaked this out? Who leaked this out? This person should be." So it's like, so what do you say? So here you are talking about this. Who leaked it out? So what are you actually saying, that you are secretly trying to do this? There's well, like I said, you got to read between the lines. Like what's
everybody thinks it's the Democrats. I don't think so. Mm-hmm. If I was going to bet money, I'm going to bet a Republican did it. Why? Because they wanted to test the waters. Yeah. They want to see what the backlash looked like. Mm-hmm. They wanted to see what kind of conversation could be had, and how they could rile up people that are pro-life, and what kind of power and what kind of voice they're going to shine on this. And I think, it's just like anything else. You can keep people quiet. I'm not a big fan of censorship. I really am not. No. And I don't want to use the term free speech, because unfortunately it's been, I don't know. It's kind of like the word freedom. They've all been mutated in the last few years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got a question about free speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. My question with free speech now, being a comedian, and people are saying, well, Elon Musk is buying Twitter. Okay. Elon Musk is buying Twitter, and he says he's going to put Trump back on if Trump wants to be on. I said, well, the same thing.
Right.
The same thing that kicked Trump off is the same thing that's getting him back on, because everybody was complaining, well, you can't kick Trump off of Twitter. Well, we're a private company, and we got the right to say who can be on and who can be on and off our format. Elon Musk is buying it. Again, it's a private company, and I got the right to say who can be on and who can be on. And people talking about free speech, it's like, okay, that's free speech. But then we say, well, I should have the right to exercise free speech. But there's been times when I've gone on the road doing comedy, and they're like, okay, no F word, no rude or crude material. Well,
no F word.
Well, wait a minute. I'm a comedian. What about free speech? You got the right to free speech, but if you say this, we're not going to work you there. You're going to lose this money. So a lot of comics have had, okay, I got to take this out of my act for this particular venue and stuff like that. So there's this question about free speech,
Well, I think it's a great question. Well, first of all, I think nobody's making the clear distinction. When people talk about free speech, I wish people understand your free speech is only protected against the government and the government infringing upon that.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk, when we talk about free speech as a constitutional right, it has nothing to do with Twitter. It has nothing to do with your comedy club tour. It has nothing to do with, me in a Tim Hortons. It has nothing to do with any of those things. Yeah. Now, me as a teacher, yes, it does. Because me as a teacher, I'm a representative of the government. And in that instance, my curtailing of speech or my manipulation of free speech does have a governmental outreach to it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all about what your rights are protected in opposition to the government.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, if we want to talk, we got to use a different term, because if we want to talk about having a free dialogue, if we want to talk about a more open, I think that's a great thing to discuss. But I saw this great TikTok that I wish I would have thought about. And somebody sat down and they did this little skit about what happens when Elon Musk takes over and he says everybody comes back on. And these guys do a little skit and they say, okay, free speech, great, everybody's back on, Trump's back on, this is great. And then one guy goes, uh-oh, I just saw somebody tweet about having sex with a dog. And they're like, oh, do we leave it up? I don't know. Do we leave that up? That seems kind of weird. Maybe we leave it up. Just ignore it. Then somebody says, oh, there's a group that's just been formed where they have a group that want to have sex with dead things. Oh, do we leave that up? Is that okay? Are we okay with? And then it goes on, right? And it gets increasingly more disturbing.
Yeah.
But it's all a matter of what level of this, because this is all talk, right? Nobody's done anything. Maybe they're just talking about it. Nobody's done anything. It's all just speech. Well, speech has power.
Yeah.
So in essence, there are always going to be lines in a company, in a government, on the road. I think the ability for us to broaden it as vast as we possibly can but never deluding ourselves into thinking anybody can stay and stand any place in this world and say whatever the hell they want. That's not going to happen either.
Yeah.
You know, and it's an all or nothing. People have it's just all or nothing, you know?
Well, let me
I don't want to hear about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't want to hear about her space lasers that the Jewish people put up there. Mm-hmm. No, I don't. You crazy moron. I don't it's ridiculous, right? She has all these people that follow her, right? But
well, I want to clarify too with free speech too, because people talk about free speech, but if you're a radio DJ, you can't go out and say, you know, blah 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 blah. If you're a news anchor, you can't go out and say blah 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 blah. You know, so like you said, free speech, it's free speech, but it only entails to what do you say, government interference or something like that.
Absolutely, and there's always limits.
Yeah.
Every freedom we have in Canada or you guys have in the States have reasonable limits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And usually those reasonable limits are hit their mark when you start infringing on other people's rights. So when you start professing hate or you start professing criminal or violent activity, now the dodginess gets in there with innuendo as opposed to directed speech.
Yeah.
You know, well, did I actually say it? No, you didn't actually say it, but you gave a wink and a nudge. What are we doing here? What line do we fall on, right?
Yeah.
And it gets very, very messy, and it's very gray. None of it is black and white, I don't think.
Yeah.
But the thing is that, you know, okay, that's government, this is political and stuff like that. And you at the beginning of the show were talking about how human kindness, you know, has a lot to do with history and fear and just all that. I think the most thing in human kindness is to educate yourself in what the strongest truth is. Not the truth that you're being fed, but the truth that you can go search for your true self.
There it is. And there's the biggest problem. When we talk about, and I love it how it tends to be more of a Republican talking point, we talk about free speech, and I agree with you, it's education, it is access to information. Yet in Florida, they are restricting literal education.
Yeah.
So when you restrict education, to me, that is the perfect example of the government. Nobody said this, but that's the perfect example of the government curtailing free speech and access to information. Yeah. When you say what's okay for a grade 3 student to hear or not hear, or what's okay for a grade 6 student. By the way, they're hearing it because they have their phones anyways.
That's right.
But you're controlling that information.
Yeah.
You know, you're controlling that. So to me, I have a huge problem with hypocrisy coming from both sides of the aisle. Yeah. I have a huge problem when it's somebody saying free speech, free speech, free speech. Oh, unless you want to talk about gay. Mm-hmm. What? I'm sorry. Unless you want to talk about trans issues, unless you want to take out the Bible and start teaching the Quran. What? No. You're
I have another great example for you. My doctor that we will be bringing on in June, he listened to my dad when we talked to him about the Civil War, and he was talking about how the Civil War wasn't actually taught in Texas the way that America knows the Civil War.
Oh, geez, I can imagine. Well, but that's true of a lot of your states, right? Uh-huh. I mean, individual states have their own educational systems. Canada does this too. We have a premier in Alberta, Jason Kenney, who doesn't want to teach elementary level kids, and I don't know about high school kids, but he's revamped the curriculum because he doesn't think we should talk so much about the bad things Canada's done anymore. Mm-hmm. What? I'm sorry. Well, are we just going to get rid of Japanese internment? We're not going to talk about that? Mm-hmm. We're not going to talk about the enslavement of Chinese forced migrants to build a railway. He doesn't want us to talk about residential schools with the indigenous population. Mm-hmm. Are you insane?
Yeah.
So it's, again, free speech. What are we doing here when the government is controlling and limiting educational values? The number one, the government controls constantly what young people know is through education. Yeah. And I don't think people understand that nearly enough.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Like, one of the things that makes me such a history buff, and do got to encourage the readers. I got to plug myself. To listen to that. We talked to Rachel's dad about the medical advances and the medical treatment, what happened in the Civil War. It's a very interesting podcast. Yeah. Now, one of the things that made me such a history buff is that when I was a kid, I learned that, President Lincoln was this great man and he hated slavery and blah, blah, blah. But then what I found out later on in life, and what really made me really into history, is like I had to find the truth. Like, wait a minute, this never happened. This is what it was like. This is what it was, and just wanting to find the truth. And that's the thing that makes me in politics too, because when you listen to the talk radio shows, this person's saying this person's saying that. Well, who's actually selling the truth? And then you find out these people are lying. This person's telling the truth, and you gotta do your own research. So
educate.
Yeah, and that's what made me such a history buff. Is like, wait a minute, I want to know the truth. What exactly is going on? You know? Like one of the things. And I think one of the things is there was an African American inventor here, a guy by the name of George Washington Carver. Now,
yes, I know. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but do you know this, that when George Washington Carver was a kid, he was adopted by a family, right? By a white family. He grew up in a white family, and they had 2 daughters. And because they didn't want him messing around with their daughters, they castrated him as a younger guy. And when he he went to Tuskegee, Alabama, when he went to Tuskegee College, they thought he was gay because he never talked about women, and then he never told him that he was castrated as a kid. And that's something they don't.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, that's stuff they don't teach, and that stuff, like I said, you got to seek out and find the truth.
Was giving false information to white people about what Black people are.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
And the reason was for control, right?
Yes.
You know what scares me about history? It scares me about politics. It scares me about everything. Let's assume for a minute that we're never getting the truth. We're getting closer to the truth. Yeah. So if 20 people were at a party, if I listen to all 20 stories about their perceptions of that party, I'm going to get closest to the truth, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. When you look at history like that, it's pretty overwhelming, but that's okay. We can get closer. Yeah. What scares me, especially in this day and age, and I talk about it with my kids all the time, it's not so much what the teacher discusses, because guess what? Kids are smart, and they're going to go fact check you, and they're going to go look up other sites, and they're going to find out, right? Because that's the era we're living in.
These days,
100%. Yes. And what scares me isn't what's taught if it's taught with bias, because I assure you there's bias. What scares me is what's omitted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's never put on the table at all, what they don't know to fact check because they don't even know what happened. I'll give you a horrible, perfect example. I went through my entire educational career, including an honors level 4-year degree, a master's degree in teacher's college, and I never once heard the term residential school.
Mm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know until I met people who were Indigenous, until I started immersing myself in that community. And I'm like, holy crap. And now we know, now we know, guess what? Because they forced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But all of those years, it was omitted.
What's a residential school? Is that home teaching?
No.
Well, no, residential school in Canada, and they did it in the United States as well. Yeah. In Canada, in order to assimilate the Indigenous population, they took their children and they forced them into boarding schools. Yeah. And they forced them to boarding schools hundreds of miles away from their home, from the ages of 6 to 16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They immediately stopped them from speaking their language. They cut their hair. They changed their clothes. They changed their name.
Forbid them to speak any language of their original language or act in any way like their old selves.
Yeah.
So they would lose all of that, right, over the next 10 years, and they would face physical and emotional abuse, very strict physical and emotional abuse. To the extent that a lot of young women were actually raped in order to thin out the Indigenous bloodline. Mm-hmm. So they would get pregnant with half-white babies.
Go ahead. For myself, I knew that it was going on in the United States, but a great show that I think you should go watch is Kindness Diaries. And that's when it woke me to that it was over there too. It was over in Canada.
Absolutely.
And
you know, sorry, go ahead.
The more that I educate myself on the genocide that was done all over the world, because I've done genocide in United States education. Now, all over the world, it's just like, I wouldn't be taught these things in school, and I'm 43, and it was, I mean, at an elementary age, we didn't have technology in front of us. We didn't have source check in front of us. We didn't question our teachers.
Yeah, that's
right.
true.
We
didn't question our religious people. You know, I remember being in CCD, and I said, how is the 3-1? You know, Jesus, no, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I'm like,
that's the ultimate question.
Right. Yeah. And he's like, they're like, he just is. And I'm like, I just want some education to process this in my head, because I am not my father.
Sure.
So at a very young age, I always opposed those things, but never had the sources to educate myself with them.
Absolutely. And there it is, right? And that's what I think when I look around the world, and I really do think this, not to be, because I don't want to be negative this entire conversation, because I look around and I look at what's happening, right? Like I look at Roe v. Wade, I look at Texas, I look at all these different states and what's going on. But you know what I look to? I look to the kids that walked out of Texas and Florida. I look to the kids that are marching right now. I look to all of these amazing, intelligent youth, and I honestly feel like this is a death thrall of the dying extreme right.
That's what Cris says all the time.
This is what they have to do. They're like, we can't control the culture anymore. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to pass every repressive law we possibly can to mute this change and mute this cultural shift. And it'll backfire to an epic. Now, the unfortunate reality is there's going to be a lot of people hurt in the meantime, but that's what will happen. This will not be the end. All they're doing is they're solidifying, emboldening, and waking up the vast majority of amazing, good, heartfelt people who are driven by justice to get up off their couch and do something about it.
Yeah.
And it will be a wave.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, just the rise up in what happened to George Floyd all over the world.
Yeah.
And what's going on with the rise up against, for Ukraine. I mean, this is unprecedented stuff that has happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it comes down a lot to the access of technology and the access of information and what we can and can't do and who we can challenge. And, all of that matters on sort of an epic level. And the access to information and education, I think, is the sort of the source of that kind of change and the source of that kind of power.
So people, you definitely need to seek the truth, get out there. And get out there, get active, and
educate
yourself. Joanne, this is we could probably go on for another hour.
I think we could.
But I guess it's safe to say we'll definitely have you back on. And if people want to see you on TikTok, how do they get to your TikTok? And I know Rachel will have something in the
description.
It's Unlearn16. That's my TikTok handle. That's also my Instagram. And if you want to check out my podcast, it's Unlearn16 Classes in Session on all streaming platforms.
Learn 16. Unlearn 16. Unlearn 16. Okay. Well, it was great having you on the show. Like I said, we could probably go on forever.
Thank you so much.
And like I said, it's safe to say. And if you want to see her on TikTok, definitely you got to check out her TikTok videos and listen to her podcast, Unlearn 16. And
classes in session. That's right.
Classes in session.
And ride happy, ride safe. I hope you get that motorcycle soon. Good luck on getting your license.
So much. I'll be test driving them soon. As soon as I get that license.
My only thing is, if you happen to read The the Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. It's not about motorcycle maintenance. It's kind of a weird
I got
book.
it.
It's kind of
okay.
A weird,
I'm on it.
It's kind of a weird book, but anyways, thanks a lot for coming on. And like we said, we'd love to have you on. Love to have you on again soon.
Anytime.
And I'll let Rach close us out.
You guys, we've come to a close. History is born on lines of hate. On here, we are trying to build lines and love and teach you guys how to be your best advocate and also educate you in being your best self. Thank you all. Have a great one.
Take it easy.
Thank you, guys.